and etc. Now, what information does GDPR apply to? It applies to online and device identifiers, such as name, email, phone, number associated with the device. It applies to cookie ID, so cookie IDs of the user. It applies to sensitive data, genetic data, biometric data, and it applies to IP addresses, so user IP addresses. Now, getting ready. We got to think about a few things here. What personal data they process, where it is across their organization, where it is transferred from and to, and how secure is the data during the whole transition. So going into it, I've been asking myself a few questions. So with the help of Neeraj here, he's going to help me answer some of those questions that I had myself originally. So storing data in an organized manner. Now, the question was, why is it important to be organized? Why is it important to have all that data stored in an organized manner? Neeraj, if you can go ahead and give us some of the solutions about how we can go about doing this.
Yeah, sure, Rajas. So we all know, right, there is a lot of data that we actually store in all our systems, and if we specifically talk about Salesforce, I know as you all may be using, right? It's not a standalone stuff that you may be using. You may have integrated that with some other systems. There may be data flowing in and flowing out of Salesforce from various sources, right? So it may be that your data is coming from some spreadsheets or from maybe some backend systems or maybe some sticky notes at your rep's desk. So it's very important to understand your data, right? In technical terms, we call it as data profiling, right? So data profiling is maybe taking an inventory of your data that stores following information, right? So if you can list your data sources, right, and name the fields in which data is stored. So you should have a list of all the sources of data that you have and a list of all the fields in which data is stored. It's very, very important. Second is you should know if you have any potential problems with your data. Now, how do you do that? So you should have some automated quality checks before you are actually inserting any new record or any new data in your database. And you should answer, are all your fields mapped correctly? So for an example, right, maybe if you have integrated your Salesforce, right, with some Microsoft applications, right? So a company field in the Microsoft application generally belongs to the account field in Salesforce CRM, right? So you should have exact documentation of your mappings in some kind of document, right, where exactly says that this company field in your Microsoft application is actually mapping with the account field in Salesforce CRM. If you don't do that, I think then we are lost. And most important thing is that to organize your data, you need to get rid of duplicate data, right? If we specifically talk about Salesforce, we have objects such as accounts, opportunities, maybe contacts, right? So we need to make sure that none of your data is duplicated. So how do you do that? First is you should have a central location in the database where you are storing data. You have all these documentation. You have done the field mappings for all the different sources of data, and you exactly know where you are getting the data from. The more organized your data is, the more accessible it is, and maybe in further slides, Regis will take you on why storing data in an organized manner will help you to be GDPR compliant.
Right. So when we are talking about securing data, I mean, for me, initially, I knew that passwords were important to be secure, SSOs. But what is important now? Is there anything new within the GDPR laws? Niraj, if you can go ahead and explain some of the new things that we should consider with the GDPR.
Sure. So initially, if in our existing systems, right, when we say when we need to encrypt data, we were very concentrated on just encrypting some of the information in the database, right? So we say that our password should be encrypted, right? Maybe our social security number or national insurance number should be encrypted. But with the new rules, GDPR rules coming in, they say that all the personal data that you are storing for your client or customer or for your user, that has to be encrypted, right? It can be the email of the user, it can be the phone number, it can be his first name, last name, even the user IP address from which he is accessing your system. They all should be encrypted. So there are various encryption algorithms I understand you might have applied in your systems, maybe AES 128, AES 256, whatever, right? But with the new GDPR guidelines in place, we should actually go and revisit our systems and see what all data has to be encrypted to make it secure. Second thing,
Okay.
second thing, as I was telling, we have data which is stored in multiple places, right? So it can be a biometric data that you are getting from a user's fitness machine or a fitness band, which is actually getting stored in a biometric device and it's getting transferred to your server, or maybe some other device, a remote device where you are storing that information. So most of the times what happens is we don't have connection to that remote access device, right? So our database is on our server, but the data which is there on the remote device, we don't have any track of it. So it's very important that we should have a mechanism which gives us access to remote access of device. And we should be very, very vigilant in understanding where our data is saved. Unless we know what we are doing with the data, it's very risky. So what we call this? We call this controlling our data, right? So controlling the data is all about achieving data accuracy and ensuring that the right people have right access to the right information, right? Which actually also means that we need to block certain access to certain people as and when required, right? A typical example, maybe if in your organization, right, if someone is leaving the organization, it's important that we block all his access and see what all system access did he had, and we block all access for all the systems from him, right? Or maybe we have certain automated routines or tools in our system that cleans your data, because manual activities take time, right? So it's always better to have some automated tools that actually trigger whenever we need to clean up that data. So cleaning up data cleansing activity should be our first and foremost priority if we actually want to get rid of unwanted data and make our data secured.
Okay. So that brings us to our next topic. So not holding on to unnecessary data. I know from past organizations that I've worked with, for example, we've kept data for in case in the future it might be necessary. Is there an issue with that currently with the new GDPR laws?
Yeah, sure. See, there are not issues, right? But I think with the new GDPR rules coming up, they have just tightened the screws on all the data that we are holding for our users. Because the more data we hold, right, the more risk zone we are in. We tend to actually hold a lot of unnecessary data, which we think we might require in future, maybe for our marketing campaigns or an email campaigns or whatever reasons, right? Which actually keeps stored in our system and sometimes actually become a swamp data, and actually we lose track of that data because we are not using it anymore. Maybe we have kept it for future purposes, and that actually does not solve any purpose. So we should have automated routines and procedures which help us in cleaning up that data that we are holding, which we don't require right now. So GDPR guidelines say any data that you don't require for your users, you should not hold up for it. You should just clean it up, right, and move forward. That actually helps to keep your data organized and clean, right, and helps you make GDPR compliant.
Okay. So for policies, for example, so some of the policies that we have currently for our company, is there anything that we need to think about for in our policies with the GDPR laws? Is there anything that we need to think about adding on to our policies or changing up? Niraj?
Yeah, see, if you see any website or any system, right, where they have all these agreement policies, right, which is actually a huge jargon of legal and account information, which sometimes we don't read even, right, because a person like me or a simple person who is visiting your site may not understand what is written, and without clicking that agreement, you cannot register, right? So he's just forced to use that without knowing, right, what is written in their legal disclaimer and all that stuff, right? But with the new GDPR guidelines, it asks that a user should be aware of what information is being collected about him, right? And he should also know that whatever information that is being collected, where will it be used and how will it be used, right? And if the information that we are collecting, whom are we sharing with, right? So to do that, they have come up that your privacy policy or the agreement, whatever is there on your system, should be written in a very simple and clear manner, which is actually understood by a common person. There should be no technical and account jargon in it. Every user is entitled to know that this is the data that is being captured about them and for this purpose. So it should be very, very clearly defined in your policy. So the time is to revisit your privacy policies and rewrite them and make them more clear.
All right. So when we go if I have a client that would like to know what kind of information I have on them, what kind of guidelines should I go by? Is there any laws that I have to follow within the new GDPR regulations?
Yes, according to the new GDPR guidelines, every user has a right to access the information in the system. He can approach you, right, or maybe write an email to you, or physically come to you and say that I want my information that you hold in your system, and you are legally bound to provide that. Not only legally bound to provide that, but also legally bound to provide that in an electronic format within a month of his request, right? And you cannot delay that, otherwise it will have legal repercussions on it. So how do you do that, right? Now, since you are holding the user information in many platforms, it may be in different systems that we have integrated. It may be in Excel spreadsheets, it may be somewhere else, right? So unless you know where all the information is stored for that user, you can never provide that information to him within that time frame. That is where this data organization comes into play, where it says that you should exactly know what your data is and you should be in absolutely control of your data. And most organizations, as you know, have data in more than one systems, right? And when there is more than one system, duplicate data tends to creep in, because and how do you just keep sync with all these systems, right? So it's easy to have to get out of sync, right? So an information may be stored in one place, but you're not syncing it with other system. So there's a mismatch, right? So whenever you are actually pulling that data, it will be different in different systems which you are providing him, which may cause further problems. So the best solution is that you should have regular procedures that are running, which keeps all your systems integrated and in sync, right? Otherwise, it would be a huge headache for you. So make sure that the data is easily accessible, it is in sync with all the systems, and you have a 360-degree view of your customers. So that if he asks for any information, you are able to provide it from any system, any remote system that you are holding the data on.
Okay. So I was asking myself the question about responding to data requests, but obviously, so what about maybe, for example, of if a correction of inaccurate data, is that something else that I have to be considerate about,
Yeah, sure.
Niraj?
Like I was telling, I was highlighting that in the previous slide as well. When you're using multiple systems, there are very high chances that the data is going to be not in sync in different systems, and that could lead to data inaccuracy. So your system may have some other information about the user in one system, and maybe some other information about the user in another system. Maybe you can take a simple case, maybe his date of birth, right? So in your Salesforce system, it may be different. In your QuickBooks system, it may be different. And user can come to you and say that my information is incorrect. Now, how do you correct that? Because for Salesforce is different, for NetSuite it is different, for QuickBooks it is different, right? Now, you end up in a mess, right? Because you don't have any control of your data. It's not in sync, right? And how do you correct that data? If you correct it in Salesforce, then it's not correct in other system. If you correct it there, it's not correct in other system. That is why it's very important that we keep the system sync and have one maybe procedures or automation scripts that actually run and sync all your databases, all your systems, and your complete control of your data. Otherwise, it would be a huge headache.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about data breach notifications. I know originally, if there's a data breach within the organization, I might have to contact the data protection officer. But do I need to do anything with the clients? Is there anything else that I might have to do during a data breach?
Yeah. So data breach can happen anytime, right? Especially if you don't have data protection softwares in your systems, or maybe if your system is hacked or there is some malicious activity going on. So as per GDPR guidelines, if you tend to know that data has been breached or your data has been compromised, you are legally bound to inform the data protection officer and the owner of the data that the data has been breached, and that too within 72 hours of the data breach. So that would actually alert the user or the data owner, and maybe they can take precautionary actions. Now the question is, how do you do that? How do you know that the data breach has occurred? And how do you actually send the notifications? Unless you have set up email and SMS notifications in your system. So make sure that there are triggers and notifications present in your system which fire emails or SMSs to the data protection officer or to the owner of the data in case of data breach. And how do you avoid data breach? Another $1 million question. Uh, do you have any event monitoring tools or any analytic apps, or do you have audit logs in place that can help you do that? If not, maybe you need to see and maybe like in Salesforce, there is a event monitoring add-on which you can enable, which actually provides you a list of all the events and what all objects are being changed, who has changed what. There is an app also called Event Monitoring Analytics apps. It sets up audit trail to give insights into user and org behavior. So it's worth setting up notifications, setting up monitoring tools, and maybe have audit logs in place, or maybe have logs in your code, right? Logs in your code also helps you collect who has done what and this exception has occurred when, right? So that will actually help you monitor your system and help you recover from a data breach position as well. So all these things, I think you should have a health checklist of your system which should have all these things in place, and then you can just mark email notifications at tick, monitoring and surveillance tools tick, right? and that will help you in controlling your data and maybe avoid these circumstances.
Okay, so now I kind of understand. Well, during a data breach, I need to notify my the owners through email or SMS. But what about during a transfer of data? When I have a client that would like data to be transferred, is there a new way that I should be going about doing this, Niraj?
Yeah, see, GDPR says that every user has a right to data portability, right? When I say data portability, it means porting the data from one system to another. So a user may come to you and say that I want all my data to be transferred from this system to that system. Now, how do you do that? You cannot just copy files from here to there, right? Unless you have specific mappings of your data, your specific mappings of your feeds in database, and you exactly know how to transfer the data from this system to another. You should have specific field mappings. You should know where your data resides into, how is it mapped, right? And that this point goes back to the data organization I was talking about before. So unless your data is organized, you don't have control over your data, you are not doing any data profiling, it's almost impossible to port data, right? And even after that, I think you should have some data migration scripts in place that can help you out in porting the data from one system to another, right? So make sure that your system is ready for data portability by doing data profiling regularly, by gaining control over your data, maybe by running sync jobs and integrate your data with other systems, and maybe augmenting and monitoring your data.
Okay, so what about deletion of data, for example? What should I be aware of to be effective as possible, and to make sure I'm compliant?
See, right to erasure is one of the policies that GDPR specifies. So if someone asks you to delete their data, you are legally obliged to do that. So data deletion is a very risky job, right? You cannot just go on and delete a row from the database and say the data has been deleted, because there are so many dependencies of a particular data with other systems. So it may be that if you delete the data in a wrong fashion, it may just screw up your entire system and your entire system comes down to a halt, right? So it has to be very methodical, right? It has to be very precise, and it should be very well organized to avoid any mess, right? So, and for that, again, the same stuff as I told you, you should have control over your data and you should monitor your data. Maybe there should be a centralized process for your mass data loads. There should be some data cleansing projects that you should always do. And if you talk about Salesforce, Force.com platform and App Exchange have a lot of tools that actually help you cleanse your data and import your data and maybe help you pull in some reports and monitor your data so that you don't fall into that loop. And maybe you should have some data integrity rules define your system, right? Which makes this data deletion activity a smoother process. It cannot be a last minute activity when the user comes and asks you to delete data. You have to be very well prepared before doing that, and you cannot. And if he finds that the data is still not been deleted, he can take legal actions against you. So make sure that you delete the data permanently from all your systems for a particular user if he asks you to do that.
Okay, so sometimes I have seen in some websites where there might be a small little box somewhere that you might not be able to see very well, that allows people to opt in for storing data. Is there anything new that needs to be changed? And if there is, what needs to be changed?
See, in our existing systems or in our previous systems, what used to happen was we used to run a lot of marketing campaign, and if you can see the screen, right, it says just enter your valid email address and we will subscribe you to that site. Which according to GDPR rules, new GDPR rule is non-compliant. You cannot just ask a user to enter his email address and subscribe him directly without taking his permission that he actually wants to share this information with you, right? So you should have an agreement or a checkbox or some kind of uh, positive response from him that lets you know, or your system, that he is ready to share this information with you. So if you see the second box, right, where it says, yes, I want to receive the latest marketing tips from this customer, read more about how we use your info. So this is the right way, as per new GDPR guidelines, to gather information about a customer. You cannot just do that without his permission. That is non-compliance. So we need to change this. If you are actually using the first approach, you need to switch on to the second approach.
So obviously, naturally, my next question was, if I have a client that no longer wants to receive emails, is there something that I need to change now within my system, or?
Yeah, so I think in the previous systems also this was an option which some clients used to provide, that they had an unsubscribe button when they were running email campaigns, so that if some user does not want to receive these notifications from messages or from mails or texts, he should have a clear unsubscribe button which he can click and he gets deleted from that system, and he is not authorized to then receive emails from your email campaign after that button. So that should be clearly in place, and once he has unsubscribed, you cannot just load him or bombard him with emails after that. That is not legally compliant. So you should always have this unsubscribe button when you are running email campaigns.
Okay. So GDPR marketing factors. What are some of the GDPR marketing factors now?
So GDPR, if you take it in a positive way, right, it can help you in marketing your software. So since May 25th is the day when you need to tell that you are GDPR compliant, or you are taking sufficient steps to make yourself GDPR compliant, customers would actually prefer sites or systems which are GDPR compliant, which tell very openly that we are GDPR compliant, and would prefer to use that system rather than a non-GDPR compliant system, like the one this says, right? This site uses cookies. By continuing to browse this website without changing the cookie settings of your internet browser, you agree to our use of cookies. So this tells you that you are actually telling the customer that you're using cookies, and whether he agrees to that or not. So they would be assured that your system is GDPR compliant and you abide by that. And that could actually help you in marketing your product well.
Okay. So from this, I feel like I've gotten some pretty strong bullet points. It's my understanding that I need to store data in an organized manner. We need to secure. You need to secure your data, not just passwords, not just social security, but everything now has to be secure. Has to be secured. You can't hold on to data unnecessarily. You have to be clear and simple within privacy policies. You have to respond to data requests. If a client wants to know what kind of information we have on them, it's important to respond to that data request. Correction of inaccurate data, data breach notifications. If there's a data breach, it's important for the owner of the data to know that there's a data breach. We have to transfer, during the transfer of data, it has to be done safely. Deletion of data, we have to make sure that we know where all the data is stored to be deleted effectively if the client requests data to be deleted. And obviously, we need to allow people to opt in for storing data. It has to be a clear way of allowing these people to opt in. And we need to have an easy way to unsubscribe. If somebody would like to no longer receive information, it's important for them to unsubscribe. So I guess that means that we need to be very organized within our information. But there will also be GDPR as a marketing factor. Now from this, I want to get into any further questions. And so we will open up any further questions to some of the people that are here within our webinar.
So do you guys have a product around this?
One second, sorry about that. Hello?
Hi, this is David Tabor, Sales Logistics in the U.S. Quick question. For a lot of this, it has to do with business process and a lot of system integration. And clearly there's a lot of complexity there. What's not clear is exactly what we need to do in Salesforce. Salesforce says we support compliance, but what is it we actually need to do to be compliant within Salesforce itself?
Sorry, I missed your name. Is that Dave?
Yes, indeed.
All right, okay. Hey, Dave, this is Neeraj here. So you are correct in understanding that Salesforce says that we are data compliant, right? But there are certain things in Salesforce that you need to do, which obviously Salesforce provides as a tool, all right? But you need to actually use those features to be data compliant. Like I told you, so are you actually monitoring your data through any Salesforce event monitoring tool? To see that there are that the data is accurate, or there are no data breaches, or there is no unwanted activity that is happening, or keeping an eye on what users are doing what, or maybe keeping a logs of the exceptions and seeing any unwanted activity that is happening in your system.
So quite specifically, Salesforce offers this thing called Salesforce Shield, which adds a lot of monitoring stuff.
Right.
But I didn't know if that was going to be specifically required for compliance, or if that's just a nice to have.
Compliance just talks about rules, Dave, right? Compliance says that you should have data, right, which you can delete anytime, right? If a user wants the data, you should be able to provide him that data, right? But how will you do that, right? Maybe I don't know if you're using Salesforce or you have some integrations along with Salesforce. And if you have some integrations in Salesforce, it's not Salesforce responsibility to keep the data in sync with other systems. That is not Salesforce responsibility. It's your responsibility. You need to define methods, right, or schedulers or triggers, which actually keeps your data sync and does not allow duplicacy in data between different systems. It's not Salesforce responsibility to avoid duplicacy. It can just tell you that you should avoid duplicacy, but how do you do that? That depends upon you. All right. So maybe you should have certain methods which keeps your data in sync, right? You should exactly know what your data sources are. Salesforce does not tell you that you need to map your fields or you need to define the data sources. So unless it's your data, right? Salesforce is just a tool to manage your data. But how do you keep control of your data? How do you profile your data? How do you integrate your data? That actually depends on the different things that you have in your systems that help you do that. So GDPR just provides the guidelines, and to make yourself compliant with those GDPR guidelines, you need to follow certain steps in your system that you need to do. So you need to control your data, you need to integrate your data, you need to keep your data clean, you need to see that the data that is integrated with other systems is in sync. Unless you do that, it would be a huge problem for you. Did I answer your question, or
Well, let's take a specific example.
okay?
A Salesforce system that is not integrated with any other system at all. Clearly, there's some procedures you need to do. You just have to have system administration procedures that look at various logs and clean things up and do, data cleansing and deduping and that sort of thing. Is simply having those procedures written down and then having people sign that they are following those procedures, is that enough? Or would they actually require you to buy new products to verify those things?
If you think that in your organization, right, you have checklists which you are maintaining, and you are happy with that the data that you have is regularly being cleansed, and the people are actually filling that checklist and saying that this is clean. So it's worthwhile, Dave, to have some audit team audit your checks and see whether they are happening or not. If you think that, so maybe what you can do is, for all these guidelines that we have told you, what you need to do, right? Maybe you can have a check. So a user comes to you and says, so are you actually deleting the data of the user that leaves your organization? Check. If you have one system or two systems or wherever his data is, have you deleted that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, done. Right. So it's worthwhile monitoring that data, because people will say that they are doing it, but how do you ensure that that is being done? So I think a regular audit process is necessary, and that will help you find the loopholes. Just saying that you are doing data cleansing activity and you are monitoring your data, that will not help unless someone external or maybe someone inside your organization validates that.
So also, I just want to add that, so GDPR doesn't actually require you to buy anything. If you can do that all on your own, then you can definitely feel free to go ahead. I just wanted to.
So, but let's flip it around. Who is going to certify that we're GDPR compliant, or is that something that's that there's no way to get specifically validated? You simply have to have a reasonable degree of confidence.
Yeah, I think see, no one is going to say that you are GDPR compliant, right? It's your degree of confidence, looking into the guidelines, or maybe you can take help from the organizations which have helped people to make them GDPR compliant. Take help from them, or maybe take consultancy from them, or maybe have an external audit from them. Maybe if they have done it for other organizations, they will actually help you tell whether you are GDPR compliant or not. There is no specific authority, right, which is going to tell you, like, we are a GDPR authority, we are going to say that you are GDPR compliant or not. You are not going to get any certificate out of it, right? It's just these 4 or 5 or 9 or 10 things that we have talked about. If you think that you are able to do that, so I think if you can check those boxes, I think you are good enough for GDPR compliant. No one is going to come after you after that. So it's
this is Peter. Okay, a big Adrian in here. This is Peter.
There's nobody yet that can kind of give you that compliance check certification to tell you that you are officially GDPR compliant. You kind of want to have somebody consultatively help you out with this.
In reality, I think we will find out if we get sued or not. That will be one indicator, and I can promise you that probably 80% of all companies in Europe are not compliant yet. All the lawyers shake their heads and they have no clue.
I'm sorry, Peter. Your line is coming in not so clearly. Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah. I'm saying the European lawyers, specifically in Germany, have all no real clue in reality how to implement it. And it is very, and all the companies just shake their head. So I would guess that 80% are not ready and not compliant yet. So I think any effort to get there and get that implemented is a good step at this time.
That's exactly correct, yep. Do we have any more questions, or?
Yeah, so you guys do not provide anything, any product, anything in addition towards that, right?
So I just wanted to mention that we are a Salesforce partner. We do offer some IT consulting. We help out with the web developments, mobile app developments, some infrastructure management, support and back office support as well. So those are some of just the services that we can offer, but it would be great if you guys wanted to go ahead into a further discussion of what we can do to help you guys out. We can definitely do that. I have put in here, if you kind of into the slide here, we have our office and my mobile information. You can contact us directly, and we can go ahead and help you guys out to figure out how we can best assist you guys within your organization.
Yeah, well, obviously we are in touch with that, and that's exactly the route we are going. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to monopolize the microphone, but if we have the time, again, this is David out in California. So let's take again a simple example of a Salesforce system not integrated with anything, but it does have the Salesforce for inbox connection to people's email systems. So let's say you have 100 users, and you have 100 users are connected. You now have 100 points of non-compliance, right? Because who knows what individuals are going to do with their email boxes and their address lists. This implies a huge number of behavioral changes for users and how they manage their address books.
Yes, it does.
Yep, and that's definitely why we wanted to make sure to have this webinar today and kind of shed a light on the issue that's come about, so that we can open you guys' eyes to some of the compliances that you kind of have to be aware of as of now. Well, as of May 25th. Niraj, did you want to add anything on that, or?
No, I think that is fine. Dave, yes, you are right in the sense that obviously if you have an email system, right, which is integrated with your Salesforce, and there are 100 users using it, so yes, you have that 100 loopholes that can come in depending on the user behavior, and you need to control it because that is something which comes under GDPR compliance. You cannot leave that thread open. But I think saying that it's not that this is something which is new. There might be certain things which we are already doing, like Dave, you told, right? We are already having monitoring tools. We are releasing the data and all that stuff. It's just a matter of maybe revisiting your systems again, right? And do some kind of audit or test and see that whether all these points that we are doing are actually covered or not. Maybe better to see it from an external point of view or from a third eye, because sometimes you tend to oversee things, right, or miss things if you're doing it internally because you think you are doing it, right? So better to have it maybe from an external consultant or someone else, right, who may be able to see it from a different perspective and may be able to tell your loopholes. And those loopholes may be maybe small things that you need to do, and he may be able to tell you, this is something that you need to do, and to make you to make you GDPR compliant.
Do we have any more questions at all? All right, so I want to thank you guys all for definitely coming into the call here today. As I said, we're HyTechPro, we definitely want to be able to help you guys as much as we can. I left my information here on for you guys to contact us if you have any further questions, and we'd be definitely glad to go ahead and assist you guys the best that we could. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Mm-hmm.